My recipe for sea salt caramels is creamy and the caramels have just the right amount of chew. So I'm going to start these caramels with 1.5 cups of sugar, and I'll put that in my pot. For a little richness in color and flavor, I add 1/4 cup of dark brown sugar, and I pack that into my measuring cup. To get the right consistency in a caramel, it takes a combination of ingredients, a combination of sugars, but also of cream, 1 cup of evaporated milk. And I'll pour that into my pot, and I'll add to that 1/2 cup of whipping cream. And for a bit of flavor, I'm going to add the scraped seeds of 1/2 a vanilla bean. If you want to use vanilla extract in place of the vanilla bean, that you would add at the very end, right when you take your caramel off the heat. But because I'm adding the seeds, I want to work that vanilla flavor in. And it takes the heat to really extract the flavor from the seeds. I have a square 8-inch pan that I've greased and lined with parchment paper. So just like the lollipops, the tools aren't complicated. I've got my thermometer on hand to measure the temperature. The entire time I cook the caramel mixture, it'll be on high heat. And because I've added the evaporated milk and the cream, you constantly want to be stirring it. And this will bubble up and steam a fair bit. So just keep that in mind. You want to pick a long-handled whisk and a long-handled spoon or spatula. All right. Oh, this is the point when your mixture really bubbles up. It's come to a full boil, so now is the time to add my corn syrup and switch to a spatula. This is 2/3 of a cup of white corn syrup. And I don't add it with the initial sugar because then it would actually cook too far and you'd end up with a caramel that sticks in your teeth. This will only take a second to return to a full boil. And when you see those bubbles, it may be tempting to turn down the heat, but you want to keep it on high. But you'll constantly stir, just to make sure that caramel's not sticking at the bottom. The temperature I'm looking for as I stir and the mixture bubbles away is 242. So that's also known as the softball stage. Well, and you think of the texture of a creamy caramel, it is kind of soft, and then it melts away into nothingness. I love that transformation of sugar to caramel as you cook it, and it can take about 8 minutes. The smell changes, the way it's bubbling changes, and then you'll see towards the end, the color changes. There we are, 242. I'll take this off the heat and I'll add my 1 tablespoon of butter. And when you're making candy, if the recipe calls for salt, it's always added at the very end. Because that little addition of salt can actually impact the texture of your caramel and prevent it from being really, really creamy and smooth. There we go. Now that it's stopped boiling, I can pour it into my prepared pan. It looks like caramel sauce just now, but it will set up because we know we hit that softball stage of 242. And my final addition before it sets up is a nice even sprinkling of flaked sea salt right on top. The sea salt that you sprinkle on top won't dissolve into the caramel, and it adds such a satisfying crunch, but it also serves to balance the sweetness of the caramel itself. You want to give your caramel a long time to set. It may look like it's set, but I find it takes at least 4 hours. So I set it aside on the counter to cool completely. And when it's time to slice it, I actually pop it in the fridge for about 90 minutes for it to cool down a little bit. You don't want to store caramels in the refrigerator. The sugar will actually melt and you'll end up with just a puddle of caramel. So it doesn't look any different after spending just 90 minutes in the fridge, but then you get that sense of that creaminess. Still a little soft. Peel away your parchment. And then slice away. You really get a sense of that consistency. The caramels hold together, but they are still soft and pliable. You want to store your caramels at room temperature, and I like to store them in a single layer. If they have other caramels stacked on top of each other, well, they will eventually flatten because part of a delicious caramel is that they are just that right amount of soft.